Okay, well, thank you, Karen and Becky, for the invitation. I'm just going to provide a little bit of background. I'm Tammy Bentley, occupational therapist, enhanced psychogeriatric resource consultant for London Middlesex. It took me months to get that right. So the background here is that we were asked to do a bit of a training session because since COVID, you're now assisting with transfers of clients. So instead of loved ones bringing or wheeling their person in and kind of waiting in the waiting room, you're assisting with the transfer out of vehicles at the beginning of the day for the day program and then back into the vehicle at the end of the day. And I was told that there's been some kind of near misses or challenges, and staff were looking for support or information around risk mitigation. So just how to do it potentially better for everybody's safety and staff comfort. So that's kind of the idea here, and that's why I'm here today. So it was a new responsibility for staff. Again, that near misses. So we're talking about a variety of vehicles here. Obviously, you know the boys and girls buses, so that's a different challenge than possibly getting into their own personal vehicle. And then there's staffing considerations, etc. So I'll be reviewing all of those briefly today, just to talk about when I came here and observed. I did an observation just to really wrap my head around the environment and what the challenges were, so that this would be evidence informed for you. Okay, so obviously it's not just physical challenges here, but we're talking about perceptual challenges, communication issues, cognitive challenges. So it's really multifactorial, and that's why I was so excited to come, as I can hopefully as an OT speak to all of those challenges here. So maybe 7 minutes of presentation and then open for question and answers after. Okay, so the agenda, I came here on the very windy day of February 13th, 2023, and I watched the egress from the day program from 2:45 to about 3:20. I'd like to put out an honorable mention to Gloria. I don't know, Gloria's not joining us today. She was one awesome staff member assisting. And since we're recording, I'm only going to provide the first name of this gentleman, but I'd also like to thank Jim, the husband of one of your day program participants. I asked his name because he had done the transfer expertly, and I just went up to him and said, well, this is kind of why I'm here. Would I be able to use your name? You rocked it. And he said yes. So I'm going to put out a special thank you to Jim. Really, my overall thought during my observation and after was that it was actually a really well-oiled machine. So I know you reached out because there have been some potential challenges, but I was really impressed. There was so many elements to consider. There was the windy day. There was individuals with bags and hats and personal items. Every client has a different challenge. So I was really actually quite impressed. I thought, why do they really need me here? But there was a few things that I did gather some information. So I'm going to be speaking to that shortly. Okay, so the environment, as I said, it was really windy. There was about 5 boys and girls club buses, as you all know. Only one, I was surprised during this really windy day, used a bungee cord to hold open that back door where they bring up the wheelchair. So where the person remains in the wheelchair and they put it onto the platform. Only one bus driver actually used a bungee cord to keep that door open. I thought that was gold standard stuff. So I think when it's windy, every single bus driver should do that, because that's a potential moment where it flies open or it makes a loud noise, and then things can really go south when you've got cognitive impairment and lots going on and you're trying to be efficient. So I thought that was amazing, and that should be done for all, especially when it's windy. I don't want to create extra work, but I just thought that was pretty quick and easy to do. Gloria brought out the sign initially, and she went to put it at the spot where the buses would stop. And unfortunately, it was so windy, she had to bring it back in because it was just going to fall over. And so I thought there was an opportunity there to maybe have, I don't know how windy it is here normally. I think it would be windy just kind of based on the layout.
Yeah.
So I thought coming up with some kind of a signage where you could like maybe hang something from the ceiling out there, or even put up a sign so that when it's windy, the buses will know exactly where to come. And so the challenge that arose with that is that a couple of the buses did not pull up quite far enough. And so then there was challenges with some of the clients tripping on the curb at the back end. So even though it was really well painted and there was yellow on it, the buses just didn't pull up quite far enough. And so that was an opportunity, I thought, just to make it clear. You could even put an X or a line on the tarmac so that when it's windy, they still know I come up to that line, even if the sign's not there. So that was a potential challenge that I noticed. And there was a couple of potential trips. I wouldn't even describe it as a near miss, but I just thought it was an opportunity that you could explore. There was two attendants when two attendants for the buses. So when somebody was in a wheelchair and they were being lifted up on the platform, I thought that was a potential challenge where the bus driver would be at the back of the vehicle or outside. And then there was a second person that was at the top. So when the resident or the client was lifted in, it was a two-person deal. The problem was at the front when there was ambulatory folks getting onto those Boys and Girls Club buses. I thought that was a potential challenge. So with cognitive impairment, obviously you all know this, so I'm speaking to the converted, but you really want to approach somebody within their eyesight. And so there were several clients who actually got on that bus. They held on to the railing well, but there was really no direction there. It went fine, but I just thought with the wrong client or a challenging day for them, or they had more of a cognitive challenge, they didn't have anybody in front of them to kind of provide any direction. So it was just kind of vacant in that moment. So I'm not sure the best way to do it, but I thought that usually the McCormick Day staff would be fussing with the walker. And I found with my career, as soon as there's a piece of equipment involved, it's almost like you look at that equipment, you want to get it out of the way for safety. And for a moment, you can forget about the client. And I'm not saying that staff didn't do a great job, but I think there really should be somebody at the top of those stairs on the buses to provide direction, or just say, come on up, or, just to provide some of that feedback. So I thought that was an opportunity as well. So as far as that's a lot of conversation around the buses. Most of the non-buses, so whether it's SUVs or four-door cars, two-door cars, whatever, I was really, really surprised that everyone but one person actually stepped into the vehicle. They didn't sit first and then swing their legs in. And I thought for sure that was what I was going to see. And luckily I've had about a month to reflect on that, because I was really surprised in the moment. Like, none of these folks are sitting first and swinging their legs in. And I came to the realization that that's what they've done their whole lives. They have stepped into the car. And so I tried it myself, and I thought if I had any kind of cognitive impairment, I would never sit first. It feels really awkward. I tried it, and I thought that's just not intuitive. So if we're thinking it's safer to sit first and swing your legs in, I would argue with the combination of physical and cognitive challenges, it's best just to let the resident do it. So even though when they're doing the stepping into the vehicle, they have an altered base of support, so it's a single leg stance, and they're leaning to the one side. Even though that might appear unsafe, I think overall that is the best way to do it for most folks. One person did sit first, so they kind of went up to the vehicle, sat down, and then lifted their legs in, but it was only one. And I didn't record how many folks left that day, but I'm guessing 50. Maybe 20 were in like single cars or SUVs, and so only one person sat first. I thought there's also an opportunity to put a curb or a yellow paint on the curb at the front side of the driveway there, because the one that is close to the long-term care part, similar to the paint that's on the side in line with the Commissioner's Road.
Like anywhere where there's a curb change, it's supposed to be painted, is that right?
I'm not sure what the legislation is around that, but if you're talking about what makes sense, what's intuitive,
Mhm.
and what is cheap. I mean, as an OT
Yeah.
in my career, you got to make it simple and you've got to pick inexpensive. So I'm really not sure if it
Yeah.
is a legal requirement, but
Mhm.
certainly it makes sense from a safety perspective,
Yeah.
for sure. Okay, so equipment, we'll move on. Oh, you're there. So there was lots of different pieces of equipment. Some, the odd person had none. There was a single prong cane, 4-pronged cane, folding walker with 2 wheels, rollator, standard wheelchair, tilt wheelchair. And some folks remained in the wheelchair to get onto that bus, that Boys and Girls Club bus. The only challenge I noticed related to wheelchairs, I would say, is there was one client that was brought out to the vehicle, seated in, I assumed it was a McCormick wheelchair because it was not put in the vehicle after, it was brought by the staff back in. It was a bit of a tilt wheelchair or a recline wheelchair. And I thought that that person in particular, that gentleman, had a lot of difficulty with sit to stand. And so I thought if he was going to be using that while at the program or to get to leave on a regular basis, it's always ideal to have that back at a 90-degree angle because it was a little bit reclined. And as you can imagine, if you're elderly and you have a cognitive impairment, you might be weak and your abdominals aren't so good. It's really hard to overcome that tilt or that dump or that recline. And so just having that 90-degree angle is key. I didn't really look at that wheelchair to see if it could be made straight up and down, but that would be my feedback on that particular situation. Okay. As far as the wheelchair goes, Jim brought his wife, I'm assuming. Yeah, he did say it was his wife. He did a beautiful job. And the reason it was gold standard is because he brought her up to the vehicle. But before he did that, he swung the footrests all the way back and removed them. And then he brought the wheelchair right up tight to the vehicle and applied the brakes. And I thought with that other fella that used a McCormick wheelchair, he the footrest, the staff did a great job. They brought the footrest back, but they did not take them off. And as soon as you don't take them off, there's a potential risk there. You can't get the equipment right close to the car as you would want to. And so removing those full stop is my recommendation, and all wheelchair footrests should come off pretty easily. So if there's anybody in a wheelchair, I thought he did a beautiful job with that. So swinging them away and removing them, because if you just swing them away and then you bring it up and then you remove them, try to remove them later after the brakes, you can't pull them up and off because it's really close to the car, right? So you want to take those off first, get rid of them, and then bring that wheelchair up close and tight. So that was a thought I had around wheelchairs. Okay, so individual considerations. So I did see a lady getting on a bus. What time we got? Because I was going to give time for questions and answers, but I get so
3:49.
passionate. 3:49, okay, we got 10 minutes. So as far as the buses go, I saw one lady with a extension contracture or a fused left knee. Couldn't tell for sure. I didn't ask her what the pathology was, but she intuitively stepped up that stair onto the bus with the right leg, which is what you want. You want to always step up for her with the knee that bends, and then she could kind of pull up, hike that hip, and bring the second one, and then up. She did it that way, but if you had somebody with a cognitive impairment, sorry, I'm going to follow myself. If you had somebody with a cognitive impairment, or maybe it was a new disability, they might need a bit of guidance on that. They might not intuitively do it. So you always want to lead or going up to heaven with the strong leg or the leg that works best. So she held on nicely and she did it perfectly. There was no problem or near miss there, but I thought if her cognition becomes more impaired or she just didn't select to do it that way, that was kind of feedback that you could consider there.
Up with the good, down with the bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
goes to
obviously,
good to have
and
it.
it's intuitive. Obviously, you're not going to, lift up a fused knee, leg with a fused knee to be your first support.
Yeah.
It's going to go wrong,
Mhm.
right? But I just thought I would mention that because I
Mhm.
thought that was interesting.
That's like all stairs. Not that we have stairs here, but.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly that is a general guideline, but again, as soon as you add a cognitive impairment and maybe there's an upper extremity that doesn't work so well, maybe
Yeah.
somebody's had a stroke, so that is a general guideline,
Right.
but it's individual specific. right?
Yeah.
So it depends on the rest of them as well, like their uppers, if, can they grab that railing really well or not, you know, those kinds of things. But certainly for her, I thought that was something to highlight, and she did a great job. So I saw various transfer assists. So I saw folks hand in hand. One, I thought it was really beautiful, actually. There was a staff member on one side and a family member on the other, and they just brought this person out hand in hand, and it was really, really well done. There was a comment about footwear. One of the staff members, there's two people, Gloria, and I didn't get the other lady's name, commented about the importance of sturdy shoes. And I thought that I would bring that up. So when deciding about footwear, not that you're going to suggest footwear to folks, but just a consideration, it depends on the gait. I worked in orthotrauma for years, and I've seen so many folks admitted with a hip fracture and a cognitive impairment because they're wearing the wrong shoes and the family thought they were the right one. So if you've got somebody with Parkinson's, for example, you don't want them to have shoes that have a really grippy sole because they have a short shuffling gait typically, and that's going to trip them up. So you don't want something that has, you know, a real slippery sole. I'm not saying that, but it really is individual specific. So a good shoe for one person is not necessarily a good shoe for another. Obviously, you don't want flip-flops, and you want something with a closed heel always, but it really is individual as far as that goes. So that was something else to consider. Vision and glare. I was surprised. There was one gentleman, he was so independently mobile, and I wasn't sure when he first came out if he was actually a participant or not. And then it made sense to me. It was a windy day, but it was super, super bright, the sun, and he was left to his own devices, which was great. He was independently mobile. That's what we're supposed to do. And I was really surprised because he went to the front of the vehicle so well in advance of the handle of the door, and he was grabbing for something. There was a reflection from the building, and he went to grab it, and he stood there for a while. So I just thought that was an important consideration to make. So it's often not just physical and cognitive, but it's also a perceptual thing. And he thought he was grabbing the handle, but wasn't. He was able to figure out that he was at the wrong spot, but I thought that was an important thing to mention for sure. Jim, his wife, I'm not sure if she has Parkinson's or if it's a side effect of her medication, but it's Parkinson's-like. So she had poor balance, limited ability to initiate her steps, and she was brought out in a wheelchair, and he's the fellow that flipped those footrests back and lifted them up. She had limited foot clearance and could really hardly do any of the steps, but he did it beautifully. Again, he swung those footrests out and took them off. And then the way that he did it was holding out his hands. And I think sometimes we minimize the benefit of the personal just holding out your hands. I mean, if you go to somebody and you go like this, they're going to grab your hands, and you all know this because you work with folks with dementia. But providing that verbal instruction or use this walker, it just often gets lost in translation. So I think a lot of times folks focus on equipment. But I think for most people with cognitive impairment, it's that personal connection. So holding up those hands. So don't minimize that might be the best solution for most of your people, rather than putting a walker in and then lots of verbal direction around how to do it and put the brakes on. And oh my gosh, by then you're lost. So some simple physical assists can be super helpful as well. And when I told Jim what a beautiful job he did, he minimized it totally, and he said, that's what I have to do at home. So he didn't give her he didn't give any words to her. He blocked her feet in front, which for her was necessary because I could see that she might kind of have her feet kind of slip out front. And so I think, again, what I wanted to highlight with that is that taking direction from well-informed caregivers is key. He knew what he was doing, and I wouldn't mess with it. Not every caregiver will have it down to a fine science like that, but when they're living it and doing it every day, don't minimize the important information that they might have for you. Yeah. Okay. And I wanted to highlight the next thing, staff support. I was really quite impressed with that arm in arm. It was a really warm moment for me, and it was quite a pleasure to watch, actually. And I was quite taken when one of the staff said, the person it seemed a little agitated, and she said in such a beautiful tone, You don't have to rush. They won't leave without you. And I just thought, no equipment is ever going to solve the problem like that, right? So your tone, the words you use, how you interact with folks is critical for sure. Okay, so I think I gone through most of my recommendations. The bungee cord, potentially having that other staff member at the top of the stairs. I think another challenge I did see that I want to talk about as well was letting go of that walker at the bus. I think that's probably a potential challenge, and it's because you've got that walker interface with getting onto the bus, and then often you don't have somebody at the top. So I think bringing that walker, and you all know this, as close to the vehicle as you can. And then I think the door, if I remember correctly, goes to the right, and then the railing is on the left. Am I correct there? Yeah. And so then you have them come as close with that walker to the vehicle as you can. And this is where I think you need two people. Having the one staff member worry about the equipment. And while they're doing that, that second staff member can watch and direct that up the stairs piece. So I thought that was it, having that other person would be really helpful to mitigate risk, and then also bringing that walker as close to the vehicle, as close to the bus as you can before they grab for that handle. So I think that's pretty much all my spiel for that observation. Now open to any kind of questions you might have related to that or something not related. Any further thoughts?
I'm more thinking when you go out there and they're arriving.
Okay.
So when I open the door, what should their legs swing out like that? Or what do you think is the best?
I think it's intuitive for them to do this.
But if they don't do that,
If they
just sitting
don't,
there like,
it's-
hello,
As far as physical safety,
I feel like I gotta go.
yeah, as far as physical safety goes, it would make sense to have both legs out and go sit to stand when they're both out.
Yeah.
You're not going to have a single leg stance. You're not going to have a potential loss of balance during that.
Right.
But if you try to interfere with that, with the normal pattern,
Mm-hmm.
that's when it might go wrong and somebody might crumble, right? So
Right.
it's kind of that interface, and you'll know with the right client. So, I mean, pure safety from a physical perspective, for sure. But this is a lot more complicated than that. And I decided actually the suggestion was to come in the afternoon. I could have come in the morning or I just came in the afternoon because I thought it was suggested that that's when more of the near misses happen. And it makes sense to me because you're more tired, you know, often after the whole day you've been here, the more challenges are going to occur. So I think there's lots of factors here. As far as vehicles go, I thought, well, you want to have, so it's easier to go from sit to stand, the higher your surface height is, right? So you want to have as high, like if you have trouble with sit to stand, having an elevated surface is ideal because you're closer to standing, it's easier to do, right? But lots of folks don't have trouble with sit to stand. And you also have to consider in a vehicle, you've got the roof, right? So it's fine to have a really high seat because Mr. Smith is 6'5", so he can stand up easier, then he's going to hit his head. So it depends on his torso. It depends on the length of his torso, how long his legs are. So there's lots of factors. I've seen for years folks who don't really, they dabble in equipment, but they don't do it well, recommend a raised toilet seat for a lady who's 4'2" after a knee replacement. Well, her legs are dangling off the toilet, and that's not safe or helpful. So it really is individual. So yes, elevated seat height is good. Having a 90-degree back height is ideal because then you don't have to overcome that. But I think for your clientele, choosing cognition first and automatic stuff, let that kind of happen rather than trying to interfere. I'm not saying don't ever provide cueing. If you think it's unsafe in the moment, of course, you've got to intervene. And I think that's another element where I often have OT students, and you guys work in this area all the time. So I'm sure you're fairly comfortable, but I'll have OT students and they'll stand back, post-op day 1 after a hip fracture and say, okay, if things went south, where are you? What are you going to talk them through the fall? No, you want to be right there and just ready, at the ready. So not close enough where you're interfering and causing confusion, but being close enough so that if it starts to go south, you're there. So I think there is a fine line between how close you are to somebody during those transfers to make sure you could assist without hurting yourself, right? If you're this far away from somebody and they start to fall and you're leaning and doing this, you're going to get hurt too, right? So I think, being close enough, especially to folks that have ongoing challenges with these transfers. Like if you know that somebody's kind of risky, just get in there, make sure you're close enough. I always suggest to my students being really tight in to the torso so that if they start to go down, you can just go underneath the arm. So people don't get hurt and then you're not reaching. So you're not causing, a lifelong back problem or whatever.
So body language, nonverbal cues, follow their lead.
Yeah.
Common sense.
It is. All of this is common sense.
Yeah.
Try not to interfere and change it unless you really think that the way they're doing it is unsafe, because I think that's when you're going to get the crumbles, or they have information overload and they shut down and they can't make any decisions that are intuitive themselves.
Like wheelchair angle to car in and out. Like, I don't know, like, is it right beside the car or you like 45?
I like it right beside.
Real tight.
I like it right beside.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
Stand
then,
up, shimmy.
that you have to turn more, but you don't have to step over to something, right? Because you've got it right beside that car. So there's no chance for that wheelchair to move, for example. It's right in tight. So that's the way that I would always do it. Of course, you want to swing that door open as far as you can and have it really tight. And also considering for the odd person, maybe it makes sense to get them in the back seat on the other side. Like, I'm not sure, I didn't see this that day, but yes, everybody wants to be in the passenger side on the front seat, but there might be the odd client depending on their disability. For example, if I had a client that had you always want to transfer towards the good side. So let's say we had somebody with multi-infarct dementia and they had a weak left side. I would want to bring them up to the driver's side back door and have them transfer towards the good side into that back seat with the right arm leading and the left leg leading, because you want to transfer towards the good side. So should that fictitious person be transferred into the passenger side? Probably not. I mean, it depends, but those are some kind of considerations.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the higher the sitting surface, easier to stand, always transferring towards the good side, and then good leg leading when going up the stairs, bad leg leading when going down. Those are kind of your typical things, but it really, with your clients, it's really multifactorial, and obviously don't minimize that cognitive piece. Now, I did bring some equipment, but I'm not sure this is really about equipment. So if you wanted to try something, I'm happy to do that. If you don't, then that's okay too.
We had a caregiver who, her husband was quite a bit taller than her. Like, I think she was like 4'10" or something. And he was total care near the end. And I remember watching her transfer him out of the passenger side into a wheelchair, and she would just, do you know who I'm talking about? Anyways, I think she actually had a belt that she would use. And it was so incredible watching her, because she was about, this big, and she could just get them. And
Transfer belts are amazing, but you have to use them properly, and they have to be used for the right indication. So just something I will say about equipment. I mean, in my 32 years of clinical work, people are always often looking for something, and they're looking for equipment to solve their problems. Yes, equipment solves a lot of problems. I have seen just as many pieces of equipment cause a problem. So somebody insisting that Mrs. Smith use this rollator because her balance is bad, don't you know?
Do you want to come
needs
back and go over a roller?
I can do,
the whole day on that?
this is my passion, this
Yeah.
stuff. So,
Okay.
anytime you
Great.
want me back, well, I've got to check my schedule, but
Yeah.
I love this stuff. So this is what OTs do, right?
Yeah.
So I've seen so many times where people are admitted with hip fractures. These are your typical clients here in your day program. And what was the problem? Tripping on the walker. At a certain point in somebody's cognitive journey, even so, it's not looking at just the balance. you have to look at the whole thing, the whole person, and that's what OTs do, right? They look at the person's cognitive ability to do it. Are they going to apply the brakes? Are they going to walk around the walker? Are they going to trip on? Some of those rollators have kind of like a bar that you push down on that will put the walker in a wheelie position, if you will. Oftentimes, those are trip hazards for people. And so looking to equipment to solve a problem without it being evidence informed is a big challenge out there. Everybody can say get a rollator, but it doesn't make it the right thing, the right choice. For lots of folks, it is.
Yeah, I
but
think
for
we can
some,
all think of 5 people
Oh,
in our, careers who are like,
Yeah.
this doesn't, like you said, take a cue from the person.
Yeah.
Like,
Where's my walker? Where's my funding for my walker?
Yeah.
Tammy's not gonna give it
yeah,
because the walker, in my professional opinion, is gonna cause more problems than it
Mhm.
solves, right? So it really is that interface, looking at the whole person when you decide how to do it. So I'm not trying to make it more complex for you,
Yeah.
but just kind of giving you that information.
Mhm.
So I did a lot of talking. Is there any more questions?
Like, do you have common challenges? Can you think of any common challenges on and off the bus, or
Yeah.
you do it infrequently with assessments, like just not experienced with it, or anything jumping out that hasn't been covered?
I freak out every time I watch people coming off the bus because it's steep, like those stairs are steep. And I'm always afraid someone's gonna, and that's another thing, like we have had people where they start to lose their strength.
Yeah.
So,
Going off is hard too, right? Like, how many people have you caught, Heather, like going up that?
Oh, yeah, one's in the chair, because they went up and their legs gave out, and like just sitting them on.
What am
their
I
legs.
gonna do now?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I didn't come in the morning, so I don't see the exit piece, but certainly going down the stairs is a different challenge altogether, for sure.
I think one of the things I really liked what you said is, we have to use your assessment around like that, watching people. I agree, sitting down to get into a car and then putting your legs in, that's the safest. However, like it's what's intuitive. And the near miss that I witnessed, the client was on one foot, trying to get in. And so the staff member, she caught him with, it wasn't you, Heather. She caught him kind of like, she bent down, he kind of landed on her knees. That was one of those people that I think would have been like, this is where I think you guys are going to have to use that intuition and like,
Yes.
okay, what do you think is this person probably is the kind that they should sit down bum first, and then, but she wouldn't know that. Like she wouldn't think to use that kind of judgment.
Sure.
So,
And I'm not suggesting that any of you should become OTs, but I just wanted to, and it is individual specific, but I was really shocked at the number of people that stepped in and I thought, oh, that's an opportunity that's a potential disaster. And then people kept doing it and doing it and doing it. I thought, wow, you thought you were smart, Bentley, when you arrived here. But it was in that observation that I really came to when I reflected on it. That's what we do. And if you try it yourselves, I did before I came in here today, I had a bit extra time. I thought, okay, give it a go. I always try equipment like dressing aids, etc. I've always tried it before I suggest it. You've got to actually try it. Not that I'm saying I know what it's like to be disabled, but I've tried stuff. I'm not going to suggest it, and I tried it. And if you have a cognitive impairment and somebody tells you to do that, it feels weird. So it's just your natural instinct to step in. For that one client, obviously, it was a different situation.
but what you're saying is it's okay to have that variability. So like, let's not paint everything with like, no, bum first and then let's swallow your legs. Like
That's the
go with-
wrong way to
go
go.
with what's gonna work for.
That's the wrong way to go, right? And that's what, I didn't want to come with a cookie cutter approach because these clients are complex. But I think hopefully I've reflected a little bit about what to consider. So if it's their intuition to do it and it seems okay, let's not fuss with it. Yeah.
What we want to do one day is install speakers outside
Okay.
and have like a club theme song. And when
Excellent.
everybody gets here, we're like conditioned to be like,
Love that.
I'm at the club,
And then
and
come
it's
and
the
dance.
cue to like get out of the car and let's go. And then
That sounds
end of the
great.
day.
That's a perfect plan.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
snag is that there's people that live upstairs
Oh.
or.
I appreciate it.
Be like, oh, great, the mom
Well,
coming. for
You know, a
half hour."
little bit of tolerance, I don't know, briefly,
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
yeah.
I don't know how to solve that problem.
Well,
So Karen, I want to thank you so much for all
You're
of this information. Really, really appreciate it. And if you don't mind, it'd be great to tap into you again
Sure.
for like certainly other topics as they.
Always happy to, speak to OT related functional things, especially for this population.
And your passion certainly.
Oh, thank you. I hope it
Demo.
wasn't overboard. I can't help it. When I get a chance to do this kind of thing, it's pretty neat. You can hit more than one person. Like that's been my whole career, right? You do your assessment, you come up with your plan, but it's nice to kind of share some of those years of experience with you guys. So thank you for inviting me and being open to my feedback.
I think even just the validation is good, right? Like I saw a lot of good things.
There was a
Right?
lot of good
So,
things. I thought,
yeah.
it's not really broken enough for me to have been here. And then I thought, okay, make it useful. So, I think sometimes the longer you're in the role, you assume folks know things or it's intuitive for them and it's not, right? We all come with different stuff. So, okay, well, please call me if you want anything further. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.